Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to my vegetable garden. So look at that. That is a blue sky and I am appreciating it like never before. That's because we went through 8 days of just choking wildfire smoke. It was awful. So this is definitely an improvement. Now I have to tell you, my heart goes out to all of the folks who are facing horrible losses and devastation from the wildfires. So please know that I'm thinking of you. Now, in the world of gardening, did you know that fall is the time to plant garlic and shallots? Well, it is. So that's the topic of today's video. I'm going to show you everything you need to know so you'll be a great success. There are two main types of garlic. There's hardnecks and softnecks. So hardnecks have a stiff central stem, whereas softnecks, as you might guess, have a softer type of a central stem, and a lot of folks like to braid them together after they've harvested them. So that's one of the differences. The other thing is look at the difference in the size of the bulbs that you end up with. So a hardneck garlic is going to have larger cloves within the bulb, and the softneck is going to have smaller cloves but way more. So it's really a matter of what your preference is. There's also elephant garlic, although despite its name it isn't technically a garlic, but it is a member of the onion family just like the hardneck and softneck garlics. Now elephant garlic has huge cloves and they have a milder flavor. Within these two types of garlic, the hardneck tends to have a more intense flavor and the softnecks have a milder flavor. Now there's one other thing I wanted to mention about hardneck garlic. As the plants are growing in early summer, they will send out what's called a scape. And that is what eventually forms a curlicue in the stem, and it's going to have a flower on the end. Those are something you need to clip off of the plants because you don't want the plant to focus its energy on blooming. You want it to use its energy to form the bulbs. So that is really important. But the cool thing is that scapes are delicious. We like to saute them. We add them into different kinds of savory dishes and they're wonderful. Now before I move on, I just realized you're probably wondering, what is that gorgeous berry? So this is American cranberry bush, or Viburnum trilobum. It is a native shrub. We grow them here and they're gorgeous. They have white lace-cap flowers in the spring that are breathtaking. Then you get the green shiny berries during the summer months, and now those berries have turned this gorgeous shade of red as we go into fall. And what will happen is this winter, birds like robins and waxwings will feast on these berries, and so it's a great attractant for them. Okay, let's get down to what you need to know for planting garlic and shallots. The first thing that I did the other day was I used this spading fork and I loosened the soil just to a depth of about 4 inches. And all I did was I just pushed it in about that deep, and I just kind of wiggle around the handle to loosen the soil. I really don't like to take a shovel and turn the soil over because that destroys the natural layers in the soil where the different types of organisms live and do good things for our plants. So you want to disturb the soil as little as possible, and that's why I'm just loosening it to a depth that the garlic will need to be planted at. The other thing that I did was I added some bone meal to the soil. You'll notice that the middle number on the package is highest. It is 15 in this case, and that middle number represents phosphorus. Phosphorus helps plants form a good root, and that certainly is applicable to growing garlic and shallots. It's also got some nitrogen, that's the first number, and no potassium. So I added it in and mixed it a little bit in that top 4 inches of soil. To plant garlic, you need to break apart the bulbs into their individual cloves. This is one of the hardneck garlics, and you can see those cloves are enormous. That's why we like them so much. And you'll notice there's a pointed end and the root end. And so if you look in the bulb, here is the root end, and this is how it was growing. So when you plant them, make sure that the pointed end is facing up and your root end is going to be facing down. As soon as I was finished preparing the soil in the bed, I moved our drip irrigation system back in place. If you have a drip system or you use soaker hoses, I definitely recommend putting them in place now. It's way easier before you plant the cloves rather than doing it in the spring. What happens is in the spring when you have these little plants coming up, it's really hard to work around them. You risk decapitating the poor things, and so it's much easier to do it now. And then the other thing that's very handy is Bill took an old yardstick that we had, and since our beds are 36 inches wide, at least at the outside measurement, he took this old yardstick and made marks for the spacing of the cloves, which makes it way easier and quicker. And then I like to use this tool. You don't really need anything fancy. You could just use your finger to make the holes. But this is called a dibble or a dibber. And all you do is just push it into the soil, makes a nice hole, and you put your clove inside there. So I'm going to start with German porcelain. You'll notice I have a label already, and that's because it's easy to forget what's what. When you plant garlic cloves, you want to push them into the soil enough so that there's about 2 inches of soil above the tip of the bulb. So I'm going to make a pretty good size hole here and then push this in. It needs to be a little bit deeper. There we go. Next up is German red, another hardneck that we just love. You can see how quickly this goes once you've got your spots marked. The last garlic I'm going to plant is incholium, which is a softneck variety. I've got my label here so I remember where these are planted. There we go. And I'm just planting 2 rows of this one. And the rest of the bed will be devoted to shallots. It's amazing what you can squeeze into a single raised bed, isn't it? This is what shallot bulbs look like. They kind of look like yellow onions, don't they? They do not form individual cloves like garlic does. So you're going to plant this whole thing individually. But sometimes there will be a couple of bulbs that form together and grow together, and so before planting them you would break them apart and plant them individually. Now you'll notice here's where the stalk came out and here's where the roots were. And so that's going to be facing down and the stalk area will be pointing up. I have a couple examples here of red shallots. And so these are all bulbs that we set aside from this year's harvest to plant this fall. Now shallot bulbs also get a 6-inch spacing, but they don't get planted as deeply as the garlic cloves do. What you want to do is push them down into the soil so that this tip where the stalk used to be is just beneath the soil surface, maybe a 1/4 inch or so down. And they're quite a bit wider, so they need a wider hole. The next step is to cover over all of your planting holes. I find this is much easier to do once you have planted all of the cloves. The next step is to water them in. It's really important that there aren't any air pockets around the garlic cloves or the shallot bulbs, and that they make good contact with the soil all around them. So this is an important step. And now for the final and most important step when it comes to planting garlic and shallots. You need to place a thick mulch over the surface of the soil in your bed. What it does is it insulates the soil. We live in a cold climate. We're in zone 5B, and what happens during the winter months is there's a lot of frost heaving. And so when you put a mulch on, it avoids that, because the frost heaving can push your garlic cloves and your shallot bulbs up and out of the soil, and they are not going to grow like that. So what you can use is grass clippings, as long as you don't use any kind of a herbicide on your lawn like weed and feed. You could also use shredded leaves, or you could use some rough compost. All of these would work just great. Now during the winter, your bulbs and cloves are going to form a really nice root system. In the spring, you'll see some little green sprouts coming up through the soil, which is very exciting, especially after a long winter like we get. Now with grass clippings, they can form a bit of a mat, and so when you start seeing the little sprouts coming up, you might need to sort of move them out of the way to make sure nothing keeps them from growing well. You shouldn't have to do that with any other type of a mulch though, but I would keep an eye on the bed to see how everything is growing. Once your plants are growing well, I'd recommend adding a side dressing of more bone meal, and that will help them grow great. Be sure to water them on a regular basis. If you're growing hardneck garlic, remember to snip off those garlic scapes so that the plants don't bloom. Now, how do you know when garlic is ready to be harvested? That's always been a mystery for folks. What you're looking for is the lowest 2 leaves on each plant to turn brown. Then you can carefully dig them up, make sure that you don't damage the bulb or the roots, and move them to an area that's protected from the weather, that's light and airy, and let them dry. You're looking for them to be papery dry before you move them into your storage. Now we store our garlic bulbs and shallots down in our basement, and it's cool. It's kind of a constant 50 degrees, and it's a perfect spot to store them until we need them. Thanks so much for watching this video, everybody. I hope it was helpful, and I hope you're going to plant garlic this fall. I'll see you next week. Happy gardening!